Running through the Forest of Fey, one of my favourite things to do is just to pull the right trigger on the controller and have the cub's little voice lift from a quiet mutter to a haunting yowl that fits the often dark and foreboding environment so very, very well. Often, another animal will be there to answer back, potentially striking up a bond that lets you work together to stop the forest from being silenced by the appropriately named Silent Ones. Singing to the flora and the fauna of this world and bonding with nature in general is one of the key parts of Fae, and it's one of the main inspirations that Zoink Games had when creating this game, for them to show the connection that they had to the forests of Sweden and evoke that through this game that they've made. These bonds with the other animals then let you overcome hurdles that you wouldn't otherwise be able to in this world. You have to make gentle overtures to them though, as much like in the real world, you can't simply run up to an animal and shout, "Be my friend!" because it would just be utterly terrified and run away. Instead, you need to gently mutter or hum, using the trigger's analog input to vary this, barely depressing it to keep the cub singing really, really quiet and moving slowly to show that you're not a threat. Call their interest and they'll come to you and sing with you so that you can harmonise with them and become friends and work together. Over the course of the game, the fox-like cub learns a few tricks to help it get around, lending the game a light Metroidvania feel, so that once you've learnt a couple of abilities you can return to previous areas and be able to access different parts of them a bit better. Lending the game a light Metroidvania feel so that you can return to previous areas and find new cubby holes which have got the upgrade crystals that unlock further abilities. First, the cub learns to hop up trees in a matter of seconds, all of this done by just pressing the jump button, and shortly after that comes the ability to then leap from those trees and glide through the air like a flying squirrel, giving you plenty of freedom to explore the world. Initially, you'll also have to rely on the other creatures that you befriend in order to help you get around, as certain plants respond only to a particular language of the forest. Birds, for example, can open up a little plant with a core that you can then throw at the Silent One's barriers and destroy them, while the little lizard's chattering gets purple flowers to open that will then bounce you up into the air. Eventually you'll gain the independence by learning their languages, but having to rely on the other animals lets the game gently lead you through each particular area as you first come to it. Zoink have really tried to avoid too much overt hand-holding through this game. They want it to be like you're discovering and exploring for yourself, and a lot of the time it really feels like that. The other benefit to this, of course, is that you also build this bond with the rest of nature in this game. The creature designs are really fantastic in Fae, taking inspiration from our world and then twisting those familiar forms into something new and unusual. All of the animals are shadowy black creatures with slightly coloured highlights, but while one might look a little like a lizard, a bit like a deer, or something like a big wolf, they have distinct differences to what we are used to. Some of the highlights in the game are the towering creatures that teach you the languages of these particular species, such as the gigantic deer that you clamber up in a manner reminiscent of Shadow of the Colossus, albeit with much less murdering of the giant creature at the end. And you do this by leaping from tree to tree that have grown on its haunches and on its back. By far and away my favourite, however, are the little lizards that you can befriend so very easily. Literally you just sing with one of them and they all want to be your best buddy and follow you around the world. It doesn't take much to gather a group of them together and then get them to engage in an adorable call and response as the cub makes a little sound and then they make this collective little Owen Wilson-like wow back at you. The animal voices can also be eerie and haunting at times, taking the sounds of the human voice actors that created them and altering them into new forms, whether it's through those actors making strange sounds with their voices, or using instruments and other effects to layer on top of each other. This does lead to some of them sounding quite similar to each other, especially when you're harmonising them and linking with other creatures and plants. The soundtrack adds its own melancholic tone to proceedings, emphasising the secluded setting and the loneliness that you can feel at times, but it's also there to add the drama and the uplifting moments when it needs to. Despite their name, the Silent Ones do actually have their own seldom used voices, seemingly ripped straight out of a 56k modem's dial-up tone. Their presence is always menacing in the game, with their humanoid forms that then turn into scuttling quadrupedal motion, and the light beams that emanate from the centre of their body that can freeze and capture animals. Avoiding them isn't too tricky, with lots of little tufts of grass that you can hide in, and the ability to climb up trees and get above their line of sight. Additionally, though, while their gaze does slow you down, you do have a few moments in order to break their line of sight if you do get spotted. Of course, you can also turn nature back against them. You are not the only one that is fighting back, and you are able to bait some of the larger and angrier animals into attacking them. You should be aware that not all animals are going to be your friend in this world, and there is a divide between the younger generation of each species and the adults, with the younger ones more willing to open up and talk to you, while the adults will basically ignore you until you learn their language. The game's story and conclusion are largely left open to your interpretation, and that has been deliberately obscured by Zoink to achieve this. So, while you might have your suspicions on how it's going to end, you can't be certain, and there's a lot that is still vague and unclear even as you get to the credits. As you play, you come across many flat black stones in the world that are covered in relatively simplistic but mysterious drawings. There's also stones that resonate to your voice and drop these little crystal globes that then let you view the world through the eyes of the Silent Ones and experience their unusual actions firsthand. It really feels like they're suppressing the forest with technology that borders on being like arcane rituals. However, some of the underlying themes are very clear to see, from the innocence and youthful adventure of the fox-like cub to the allegorical impact that the Silent Ones are having on the forest and its inhabitants, making it akin to the effects that humans will have on their own environments. I mean, of course you're going to defy them and stop them from trapping animals because it just isn't right, and there's a genuine emotional reaction as you see one of the bird-like creature's eggs being stolen away, and the rather chilling manner in which animals of all sizes are caught in these cocoons that the Silent Ones then drag them away in. As alien as this forest can be at times, it can still tap into your very human empathy that you might have for animals. There are a few minor niggles that I had on my journey, however. A few of the leaps that you're expected to make between trees are just a little bit too far to make comfortably, and that can turn into slight frustration when you're trying for the fourth or the fifth time to make a particular jump. And when you leap up onto a friendly deer's back, you can ride them around, but suddenly that makes the controls rather loose feeling, like you don't really have control. That's appropriate, but it makes a fun and cute idea something that you'll probably only try once or twice as you play the game. For someone that plays the game and habitually pulls the right trigger, such as myself, just so that you're singing as you're running around and setting off a ripple of sound in the surroundings as the plant life reacts to you, it's perhaps a bit too easy to call a guiding bird to your location, which is done by singing at the top of your voice for a couple of seconds. When Zoink have tried their best to keep you away from having to look into the map or follow waypoints, having the birds come and lead you along, that can detract from the feeling of pure exploration that you have. The game looks gorgeous with this dark scenery covered in black trees and being roamed by these shadowy animals, and the thick blooming lighting gives the game its own distinctive tone. There's a lot of blurring effect around the edges of the screens though, and that can sometimes be a bit too much, softening the image in a way that almost makes it hard to look at sometimes because you can't quite focus on it. Generally, the performance and the handling of the game feels excellent when playing on PlayStation 4 Pro, though there are frame rate stutters when loading in new areas, and those carry over to the Nintendo Switch. Though the art style is very much intact on Nintendo's console, which helps it feel very close to the quality of the PS4 version, the frame rate does struggle a lot more in both handheld and docked modes. This is in addition to when it's streaming in a new area and larger areas push Nintendo's console beyond its comfort zone, it seems. Though I would say that the game is still more than playable despite this. Another compromise is that without an analog trigger on the Switch, controlling the singing is done by default by tilting the controller. In handheld mode, however, this means tilting the entire console, and it alters the angle that you're viewing the screen from. It takes a little getting used to doing this in a way that you can still see what's going on, or alternatively you can dive into the settings where you can map the tilt and the analog input to the right analog stick instead. Fae is a thoroughly lovely adventure, full of wonder as you explore and lose yourself in this darkly wonderful forest. Its distinctive art style and the unusual creature designs are something that is both familiar and alien at the same time, and this is only enhanced by the almost ethereal lighting and the animals' unusual voices. So yes, there's a few nitpicky design issues and some shaky performance on the Switch, but it's easy to recommend this charming game of discovery and singing to the world. Thanks as ever for checking out our videos, and we hope that you've enjoyed it. If you have done so, please do like and subscribe to our channel to get more of this content, and you can also come and visit us over on thesixthaxis.com. Hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!